Okay, it's 6 p.m. We're going to get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I think people are still jumping in, but in the meantime, I just want to say welcome to all of our fabulous crime writers tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Let me do just a quick introduction for everyone. Welcome to WeHo Reads, Writing Paths Towards Justice. This is our second event of the year, and we're going to be talking about crime and justice and vigilantism and law and order and all the fun stuff that gets packed into these amazing authors' works. So here's how it'll run. I'm going to introduce our authors very briefly, and then we're going to get into a discussion of characters. And then I expect at some point, you know, this this will just steamroll right over me, and we'll have a good discussion of between authors who know each other pretty well. But if ever I need to jump in, I will get us back on track. So what we're going to be talking about first is what path each author took toward writing crime fiction and what fire in the belly motivated them to write about the subject matter. And well, Steph, I think we're going to start with you. So Steph Cha is the author of Your House Will Pay, winner of the Los Angeles Times Book Prize and the California Book Award, as well as the Juniper Song crime trilogy. She's a critic whose work has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, USA Today, and the Los Angeles Review of Books, where she served as noir editor, and is the current series editor of the Best American Mystery and Suspense anthology. A native of the San Fernando Valley, she lives in Los Angeles with her family. And Steph, thank you for making time to be here tonight. How did you get started in crime fiction?
Well, it's the same thing, right? I actually, I took a class my freshman year of college called American Detective Fiction, in which I read books about LA really for the first time. You know, I grew up here, but LA in literature, you know, it just hadn't really come up in my high school curriculum. And I remember reading The Big Sleep and just getting walloped by this sense of recognition that felt so cool to me. Also later in that same course, reading Devil in a Blue Dress by Mr. Mosley here. And I wanted to be in conversation with Raymond Chandler, actually, because I read that book and it just kind of unlocked something for me, where I thought, man, you know what I'd really love to read is kind of an updated LA noir that kind of showcases the LA that I know and grew up with. You know, particularly, I wanted to read something with a Korean American protagonist, you know, set in the present day. And I think I wanted to find that, you know, as a reader, and I don't think it existed at the time. And so when I started thinking about, oh, maybe I always kind of wanted to write a book. You know, it was just kind of a childhood dream of mine. And when I started kind of noodling around with that, I decided to try to write a book that kind of was a bit of a Raymond Chandler update, with a Korean American woman as a protagonist. And so I really backed into it through LA fiction, you know, and I just happened to be lucky in that some of the best writing that came out of LA is so tied up with this tradition of crime fiction. And then once I started writing those books, I realized just the incredible versatility of the genre, especially to address, you know, the way we live, the world we live in, the kind of balances of power, the way that people interact with each other, you know. And so I stayed in the genre because I just thought, you know, where else am I going to be able to kind of attack some of these issues, some of these loaded relationship dynamics head on.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And we're going to talk more about kind of how power gets exercised in social conflict, and the books that are in conversation with each other today by the authors who are here today. So thank you, Steph. I'm going to introduce Kellye next. Kellye Garrett is the author of Like a Sister, about a Black woman in New York City looking into the mysterious overdose of her estranged reality star sister. In addition to being featured on the Today Show, the suspense novel was a Book of the Month April 2020 selection, the Oxygen Channel's July Book Club pick, an Edgar Award finalist for Best Novel, and the Lefty Award nominee for Best Mystery. Kellye is the co-founder of Crime Writers of Color, and also wrote the Detective by Day Lightweight Mysteries, which have won the Anthony, Agatha, Lefty, and Ippy Awards. And Hollywood Homicide should not be left out of that list. It is a fun book set here in LA and across Southern California. So welcome, Kellye. Why crime?
My mom, I'm going to blame my mother. She loved reading, and she let me have full reign on her bookshelves. And so when I was little, I used to read like Encyclopedia Brown. And then when I got older, like around 11, I discovered cozy mysteries. And I was lucky that I was a teenager in the 90s. And that was at a time when like Walter was being published and Barbara Neely was being published and Valerie Wilson Wesley was being published and all these amazing Black authors were being published in crime fiction. And I truly believe that representation matters when you see yourself on the screen or on the page, like you think you can do it. And so because my formative years were that time, I always was like, wow, I feel like I can one day write a book and write a crime fiction book. Of course, what happened is, with a few exceptions like Walter and a few other people, a lot of those authors I loved in the 90s, they weren't being published in the 2000s because of publishing. And so I had the idea for a cozy mystery, which became Hollywood Homicide like 2011. I naively thought that like, oh, no other Black people are writing cozies. It's not true. They just weren't publishing them, So my first book came out in 2017. Second book came out in 2018. My publisher closed, had a 4-year gap, and then finally like a sister came out last year.
Congratulations. It's a fun ride.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us from the East Coast tonight.
I know it's pretty late. Well, it's not that late, but it's late for me.
We appreciate it. We'll try to keep you awake.
Thank you.
I'm going to introduce Jordan Harper, who is the Edgar Award-winning author of She Writes Shotgun and the recently released Everybody Knows, which came out in January. And that book feels like you get a glimpse behind the headlines, and it's real cynical and ugly. It was a great read. So Jordan, welcome. Tell us how you got into crime fiction.
I apologize for starting my story in 1932, but in 1932, there was a gunfight in my hometown. I'm originally from the Ozarks. And there was a gunfight between 10 cops and 2 car thieves that ended up with 7 policemen dead and the 2 brothers, the killers, getting away. And one of those 7 dead policemen was my great-grand uncle. And my great-grandfather paid some local reporters to write up a very pulpy description of what's now known as the Young Brothers Massacre. So I grew up with my grandfather, his nephew, who was a prison guard who made knives in his spare time and gave me chewing tobacco at a rodeo when I was 7, and told me stories about Bonnie and Clyde. And he also made sure that I read this book when I was maybe 6 or 7 or 8 years old. And it's very pulpy and very violent. And I read it now, and I understand that not only reading this kind of stuff, but being told it was important, had a really deep imprint on me. So I've always since then been fascinated with the violent side of life, and particularly its potential in storytelling. And so, I didn't know, being from the Ozarks, I didn't know what it meant to be a writer. I always wanted to be it, but I didn't know what it meant. So I worked as a music critic for a couple of years. I was a film critic for a couple of years, and I started writing short stories. And the first one of those was called Johnny Cash is Dead. And I wrote it right after my grandfather died. And he was very much like Johnny Cash, who'd also just died. And so I wrote a crime story because I didn't know what other kind of story to tell that could kind of capture this like vanishing type of person, and trying to grapple with like the parts that I loved about him and also the violence that he was a part of. And that's what started, was writing that short story. And I kept writing short stories. I used one of those short stories to get my first job in television, and I've worked in television ever since, and got kind of tired of being hemmed in by CBS procedural morality, and that's when I decided to write She Writes Shotgun, and as a an escape valve from network television, and that was the start of it. But for me, it's just been a lifelong obsession and thing that I think about all the time. So yeah.
Interesting. Well, welcome. We're going to get into how morality shows up in your books, and I think that'll be a useful and interesting conversation. I do want to introduce now Joe Ide, who is the author of the acclaimed IQ series. His most recent book is a Philip Marlowe novel titled The Goodbye Coast. Born and raised in South Central LA, he currently lives in Santa Monica. Joe, welcome. How did you get into this fun thing called crime fiction?
I grew up in South Central LA, an area that was full of crime and gangs and all the inherent problems of the hood. But as an experience, it wasn't any different than what millions of kids go through every day. My grandparents were very old world. They spoke almost no English. They were stern, they were formal, and very traditional. My grandfather had collected samurai swords, and my grandmother had a koi pond, and she wore these beautiful silk kimonos around the house. And they treated me like somebody else's cat. You know what I mean? Like they couldn't actually kill me, but they didn't have to be nice to me either. My parents, they wanted to, their aspiration was to get the hell out of the hood and be Brady Bunch mainstream. That's what they wanted for their kids, me and my brothers. But most of our friends were Black, and we co-opted their speech, style, attitudes, musical taste, all of that. So there was always this kind of cultural, generational tension within the house, made more so by the fact that both my parents and my grandparents, they wanted us to have some connection to our own cultural heritage, which never really worked out the way they'd hoped. Like my brother, he got kicked out of a Japanese Boy Scout troop for buying his merit badges. He didn't really get the whole Boy Scout thing. And I'm 4 years younger. I'm really jealous because my parents are so proud of him. And it was all the more aggravating because I know it was a scam. I knew my hood rat brother could paddle around in a kayak and build a wigwam. And the sort of net result of that was that I was culturally all over the place. I mean, I certainly wasn't Black. I wasn't white. I felt way far from being Japanese. So for most of that time, I really felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. I just didn't belong. And I think that was why I was drawn to the original Sherlock Holmes. Here's a guy like me, doesn't belong, not a badass. But unlike me, Sherlock had an identity. He was confident. He knew who he was. He could face his world and not be afraid with just his intelligence, which was a very powerful message for me, a small kid in a big neighborhood. It was sort of hope, that there was a way for a kid like me to face his own world and not be afraid. Came time to write a book, my first book, IQ. All of that sort of came together by itself, and Sherlock in the Hood was born.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk more about family and how family shows up in these stories because it's a central feature in many of them. So I want to come back to that. But welcome, Joe, and welcome, Walter. I'm gonna read as much of your bio as you let me, but I imagine you may cut me off and just say, "Hey, I know who I am."
No, yeah, well, I can tell you that now. I mean, you read whatever you want, but you don't have to go on and on.
Well, everyone should know that you are and probably already does know, that you're the award-winning author of over 60 books, beginning with Devil in a Blue Dress, which, everyone's referenced tonight as a classic. There's some other fascinating elements of your writing career, some political monographs, a memoir in paintings called Elements of Fiction, and a young adult novel called 47, and you've been translated in 25 languages. I mean, the accolades go on from there. I just want to add one thing personally. Your most recent book, I think, came out yesterday or earlier this week, and it's a Joe King Oliver book. The first that I read was Down the River Unto the Sea, and was just blown away by the nimble twists of expectations that appear in that book, and I'm really enjoying your latest, which just came out, and so Every Man a King, and so just welcome. Super excited to have you. and look forward to the discussion. But tell us, well, I mean, how did you get back into, or how did you get into crime fiction?
Okay, I mean, okay, I'll say that, but I'm like amazed that all 5 of us are television writers. That's like wild. Every one of us, like, because I remember that group of people that Kellye was talking about. I was part of that group. There's like 9 or 10 or 11 of us, and none of us were TV writers. So like the idea that all of a sudden, anyway, I wrote a book called Gone Fishing. With a 19-year-old Easy and a 19-year-old Mouse in southern Texas and over to the border of Louisiana. And, and I really liked it. It was fun. I'd taken a class with Ed O'Brien. Ed O'Brien, told me to write a novel. And I was so much in love with her that I just said, okay, and I wrote this book and I sent it out. And everybody I sent it out to said no. And the no was basically it's good writing, but nobody will buy it. And when pushed, they say, well, white people don't read about Black people, and Black women don't like Black men, and Black men don't read. So what are you going to do? Now, all of that was true because the publishing industry decided it was true. It wasn't really true. If they put the book out there, that would be something different, but they didn't. And so then I decided I'd write another book about Easy and Mouse, but I would put them in Los Angeles. Now, the thing is that it was still mostly Black characters, but I didn't think about that. And so I wrote that book. I was writing that book, that book. And when I got about halfway through it, I realized that it was a mystery. That and that my main character Easy was an amateur detective. If the word amateur fits on him, and I just went, okay, so it's a mystery. Now, my understanding of writing, and I'm probably all of my friends here kind of think it, that, there's mystery writing, but, to be a mystery writer is kind of, well, it's not silly. I mean, somebody might actually want to be that and only that, but I don't think that anybody here is only that. And certainly not me, so I write all kinds of books. I mean, there's not a novel written that isn't a mystery. There are very few novels written that there isn't a crime at the heart of someplace. But I really like the genre. I love it, as a matter of fact. And it's really fun to write in it and to play in it and to do things. And I think it's really a help to feel lighthearted about the genre itself, and then maybe more serious about what the subjects that you touch upon.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Every Man a King and this character of Joe King Oliver, because he's got a dark past, and it's not anything that he did, but what has been done to him. He went through that period of imprisonment. Basically, he was set up by his cop friends, and so that's always lingering in his past, sort of surging up at moments. Those memories come back to him. I'd love to hear just how you came about with that character. What was the journey to bring him alive, and where are you taking him on this latest book?
Well, this book, I mean, if I were, because like there's always, the books always have like, books always have like an underlying meaning. And I realized, I did my first reading last night, and I realized when I was thinking about doing the reading that the underlying thing about the book is replacing hatred with love. So that's what I was writing about. I didn't know that at the time, but I do now. And it was very important to me. It was very important to me to write about my main character, this Black guy who's seriously Black. I mean, he has a grandmother who has a white boyfriend, but it's only 3/4 of a relationship because she's never going to kiss a white man. He comes from that kind of notion of race rather than some more Angela Davis kind of thing. And but he's been hired to find if this alt-right guy who's been thrown into Rikers for who knows why, if he's really done something wrong, and he's taken the case, and that whole thing brings up all of these conflicts in himself and his life with his daughter, who he's so close to. Everybody is like, thinking, what are you doing? And it's just to follow that path into replacing hate with love. And it felt very cool to me.
Mm-hmm. I one of the things I appreciated a lot is his relationship with his daughter, which you just mentioned, and how contrasting that with his relationship with his ex-wife, and how, he will do things for his daughter that maybe his ex-wife benefits from, but he really, there's a bone to pick there.
Yeah, he'll do anything for his daughter, and she for him, which is, to create that relationship, that incredible bond is really, it's fun to do. And, as far as readers are concerned, readers kind of like that, to see, they like that, and they like the opposite of it, which I guess is the ex-wife.
Yeah. Let's talk to Jordan next about May. So May is introduce us to May. What is her problem? No, but she's a wonderful character, but she's a bit isolated, and she's found herself in the midst of this industry, which is sort of the dark underbelly of Hollywood and media, and it's darker than anyone could think of in a conspiracy theory, what she actually has to deal with. So what is it about May that got you fired up for this book?
Well, so May Pruitt is what's called a black bag PR person or a crisis manager. She's not the person who gets the good news out. She's the person who keeps the bad news in. And I had, my previous books and fiction tended to be more about people from the Ozarks or people from the Inland Empire who are poor white trash, because that's the rednecks, the kind of thing I grew up with and what I was familiar writing. But at this point, I had been living in Los Angeles and working in Hollywood for 13 or 14 years, and writing about rednecks and white trash didn't feel authentic to me anymore. I didn't feel connected to it in the same way. And I knew it was time to move on. And at the same time, I had tried and failed to turn James Ellroy's LA Confidential into a TV show. We got to the pilot stage, it had a great director and cast, and it didn't happen. So I had this sort of James Ellroy epic LA energy inside me that I didn't get to use. And so I knew I wanted to tell a story that was, from the homeless camps to the mansions of Los Angeles. And I wanted to do it and deal with the bad things that I had seen in LA and in Hollywood, and the compromises I had made. And the thing about May that really appeals to me is, she's smart, she's talented, she's fearless, but she is a person, I think a lot of people in modern day America in that sort of professional managerial class of which I am a part, think that if they feel bad about something, that's good enough. Yeah, we do bad things, but I feel really bad about it. It's in that way, it's a critique of liberalism, I think. And I really wanted to take those feelings I had about Hollywood and put them in a more exciting shell, which to me, I didn't want to write a book about and this is the other thing about crime fiction to me, is I didn't want to write a book about a TV writer who feels bad because he's making money while watching actors abuse other people. I wanted to tell something that was like the more elevated kind of crazy electric version of that. And so to me, that's who May is. And so, we meet May at the Chateau Marmont solving a problem for an actress who's out of control. And then her boss at this company she works at approaches her with, basically, he says, I have the big secret I think we can sell for a lot of money. We're going to go rogue. And then she's driving to the Beverly Hills Hotel to meet him. And she's in that kind of traffic that when you're in LA, and this is not a good thought, but sometimes you have it, is you're in traffic and it's so bad, you have the thought, I hope somebody is dead at the end of this traffic jam to justify how bad the traffic is. And so May is in that kind of traffic, and she gets so frustrated, she pulls over and just starts running down Sunset Boulevard to make this meeting on time to find out about this scam. And it turns out there is somebody dead at the end of this traffic jam, and it's her boss who has been killed in what appears to be a carjacking. And that draws her into this world that she's already a part of, but it draws her deeper into what I call the beast, which is this like collection of lawyers, private security firms, and black bag publicists who kind of grease the wheels for the rich and powerful. And that's really the world that I wanted to explore and kind of dig up.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got there. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the similarities between your book and Walter's was this sense of like an impending power and of the billionaires or the very, very wealthy class who, you know, can swoop down with so much money and solve any problem of their own, creating problems for everyone else in the process. And I just love drawing similarities between books. Another thing I noticed between Everybody Knows and Like a Sister is that both felt super contemporary in how they portrayed the media and what was going on. And so Kellye, with Like a Sister, we have at the very heart of it sort of a social media story, right? With Desiree and what happens to her. Tell us about Desiree and her sister Lena and what you were playing with there in their relationship and in how the story unfolds.
So I'll start off with the idea. I got the idea from a New York Daily News headline. And it's similar if you read the first chapter of the book, there's a headline about the woman, the victim in the story, Desiree Pierce. And it was like, former reality star found dead in Bronx with cocaine and no pants on. And I thought it was a horrible headline, but of course the writer in me was like, oh, that's a book, right? Like, how did this glamorous reality star go from partying it up in downtown Manhattan to dead alone on a street corner in the Bronx? And then I had this idea one day, like, oh, she was going to see her sister and she never made it. Her estranged sister at that. And so that's the story. And it's told from the POV of Lena Scott. And she just knows her sister, who she hasn't seen, but she stalks on Instagram, you know, and I think that's the first like line in the book is like, I knew my sister was back in town from Instagram. I knew she died from the New York Daily News. And so even though they haven't talked in 2 years because Desiree has a drug problem, she keeps tabs on her, you know, and I think that even with me, like, that's why I love social media, where I don't have to talk to somebody to know what they're doing. Like I can be like, oh, what about that one person I met 10 years ago? You know, like I can just look their name up. And so I kind of play with Instagram versus reality, you know, like you kind of have this kind of, you know, filtered life in more ways than one, where everything's perfect on Instagram, you know, and it could be a mess in real life, but you have to pretend it's pretty for the picture. So I wanted to play with that a lot. I wanted to play with family dynamics. I have two sisters, so I kind of know the relationship can be very love-hate. And I think, you know, you love them even when you hate them, and they feel the same way, you know, about you. And I also wanted to play with the idea of her and her dad as well, and kind of estranged parents and the idea of a parent not being there for you when you're young, but when you're adult and you don't really need them anymore. Here they are wanting to be a parent. So that's kind of like the subplot in the book is Alina's estranged relationship with her dad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Joe, the Goodbye Coast, tell us about the characters that you fell in love with or maybe fell in hate with during the process of writing.
Well, when I first heard I got the assignment of writing a contemporary Philip Marlowe, I was thrilled. I was overjoyed. I mean, it's an honor for any crime writer. But the next day I started to have second thoughts. I mean, there are a lot of hardcore Raymond Chandler fans out there who know his work intricately. And I couldn't duplicate Marlowe, and I certainly can't write like Chandler. So it became a question of, you know, how not to be scoffed at. And he also writes, you know, he writes very intimately in the first person, which I don't know how to do. It's a skill set, you know, all by itself. I write it in the third, where you're going from point of view from character to character. And I'm running all this through my head about how to write this. And my wife finally said, well, you can only write the way you write, which solved the problem. And then there was the question, well, what does contemporary mean? You know, I couldn't just take Humphrey Bogart and put him in a Tesla driving down Rodeo Boulevard listening to Jay-Z, the best I could do was to take some of the original characters' characteristics, qualities, and move them forward into a new character. His brashness, irreverence, cynicism, his dedication to justice hidden behind this very spiny kind of exterior. And the original character also worked cases that were both upscale and seedy. And that's where my story takes us, from a movie star in Malibu to a runaway girl in East Hollywood. I don't know if I've done any of those things successfully, but I gave it a try. I mean, in the end, it came down to, I have to write a good detective story. And that's what I tried to do.
Yeah. I'll want to come back to this idea of like the high life and the low life and the characters who are able to move between them, because I think it does come up in all the books. So thanks, Joe. And Steph, Your House Will Pay has two main characters, really. We have Grace and we have Sean from different worlds, sort of growing up in the aftermath of the riots and the conflict between Korean American and Black Americans in Los Angeles. I'm not going to ask if you have a favorite, but what was it like to go on this journey with each of those characters and to bring them closer and closer as the book moves on?
Yeah, when I when I first decided I wanted to write about Sunja-do and Latasha Harlins, I was thinking about the family of Sunja-do, who was the killer. The visceral reaction that I had when I was kind of researching that story was very much wondering why I felt so implicated by what this Korean woman did decades ago when I was a child, and really wanting to explore kind of the implications of that, for a character. And I'm not the daughter of somebody like that, but making Grace the daughter of a Sunja-do figure, that kind of really solidified. It gave me a way to kind of give a very solid, concrete form to a lot of those emotions that I wanted to examine in myself. And so Grace is somebody who, from the very beginning of the project, I knew I was gonna write about, and I was gonna occupy her point of view. And I had initially written a short story that was about these two Korean American sisters who find out that they have this incredibly horrible family history and trying to reckon with that. And when I decided that I wanted to expand that into a novel, I realized that I would also have to bring in the other family, because I think there's something that happens when you write a book and when you read a book is, even if you as a writer give the most nuanced portrayal possible, even if you make your characters despicable, you are inviting empathy from the reader and identification from the reader just by presenting that point of view. And so I thought, okay, if I don't have a point of view character from Ava's family, the girl who's killed in my book, the corollary to Latasha Harlins, then what's going to happen is that the reader only identifies with this Korean family who has this really awful history, and then there's going to be this Black family who I think as a non-Black writer I think the danger would have been that I'd make them really pretty and neat and untouchable, because I think that without occupying that point of view, I think I would have felt too much like, oh, if I kind of dirty them up from afar, it's gonna feel weird and half-assed. And one of the things I wanted to look at in this book was this idea that the victims of crime, the victims of violent crime, do not have to be angelic. They don't have to be perfect. And so, since that was something I actively wanted to write against, I kind of thought, all right, I'm gonna have to write this character. And so Sean came to me this this brother of a girl who was killed as a teenager. And he was honestly a lot harder to write because I've been a 27-year-old Korean American woman. I've never been a Black man. And it's actually funny. At some point, someone pointed out that I also wrote a male character as a female writer, and like that was like the easiest thing in the world. I could write men all day, because I've just been occupying the male POV since I was a little baby. Every cartoon I watched, and everything that came after. But writing a Black character as a non-Black writer is something that I took very seriously, and it took a long time, and it took a lot of layering just to get him to feel solid, to feel as imagined as Grace was, just kind of coming out of me. But yeah, I feel so. By the end of that project, I felt as close to Sean as I did to Grace, if not closer, because I spent more time with him. But those are both characters that I put my whole heart into, and watching them interact with each other, which they only do in very limited scenes, was something that was very interesting to me from the beginning.
Yeah, and the sense of the hate that they carried, and how that powers their dynamo really as they get closer and closer, and that drives a lot of the story, is how will this play out, because you can I felt that was really well done. So we're going to take a little pause here for official business, but then we're going to get loose and it'll be more of a discussion. So I'm glad that we've had a chance to meet the authors, to meet their characters. This part will go by pretty quickly. I'm here to thank our sponsors. The City of West Hollywood presents WeHo Reads, and so thank you to the city for making this happen. Thank you to our additional financial contributors from UCLA Extension Writers Program and Poets and Writers. And thank you to our media partners, BookSoup, bookshop.org, and the LA Review of Books. We are grateful for helping get the word out about this series. I want to bring in Mike Che from the City of West Hollywood. Hey, Mike.
Hi there. Thank you, Cody. First, I'd like to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge that the land that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood is the occupied, unceded, and seized territory of the Gabrielino, Tongva, and Kizh peoples. We want to honor those who have stewarded this land throughout the generations, and we pay respect to their elders, past and present. I know there's a lot of people here from all over LA County and all the country and hopefully the world. So I encourage you to honor those people who were the stewards of your lands, and you can look that up at www.native-land.ca. Thank you for everyone who's joined us. I know there's actually quite a few people on the YouTube live, and I've been managing that chat. There will be a Q&A at the end of towards the end of the program. So if you have any questions, put those in, and Cody and I will share them with the panelists. Cody and I will, and hopefully that we'll be able to get to a few of them. I want to thank really, truly the authors who have joined us tonight. The incredible accomplishments and talent that is on this Zoom call right now is amazing. So thank you for sharing all of your insights, your stories. I am fascinated by all this. So thank you. And then, of course, this is a program that is produced by the City of West Hollywood, and we cannot do that without the support of our city council, who loves the arts and funds this every year. So we're very happy that we actually have our Mayor Pro Tem, John Erickson, has joined us. And if you'd like to say a few words to welcome the crowd, John, the floor is yours. And you're muted.
Oh, we love Zoom. It's so great to be here with you. I'm in a closet right now at an art gallery, so no better place to be introducing an amazing panel for all of our WeHo Reads and everything that you do. But no matter where I am in this world, I always love to come to these events and just say thank you to each and every one of you. It's so important to me. I always say, show me where your dollars are, and I'll show you where your priorities are as a city. And this is such a priority for us as a city. And the arts are so special to my heart because it means I'm not reading a policy item and I can actually enjoy life for a second, maybe just a small second. But I want to thank all of the participants tonight, the organizers, Cody, Mike, everyone. I'm just so thankful for a little bit of tranquility, peace, and happiness that you bring to so many viewers and everyone that we do. We need that now more than ever in this world. And so as someone who just adores
John, the signal in the closet's degrading.
work that you each and every one of you do, and everyone watching. So that's it.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your words of thanks. That's great. It's great to see the city supporting us. Thank you, Mike, also. And we're going to get back into it. So where I want to take us next is really to think about justice and the extent to which characters in their pursuit of justice, or what they see as justice, are working within or outside the law. Many of the books that you all have written show us a society where corruption is endemic, where the authorities can't be trusted, where characters have to take action on their own to right wrongs, and they end up crossing lines in the process. Many of the books explore the consequences of those, the tensions that those characters are navigating. That's a lot of questions from me, but I would love to hear from Kellye, maybe first, to put you on the spot, because it's late where you are.
First, I love that he was in a closet talking. So I think for me, Lena, it's obviously she's not a professional investigator. She's just someone who doesn't believe the official story that her sister died of an overdose. And I do start the book off with them talking to the cops and her trying to insist to the cops that it was more than that and them not believing her. So in her mind, she doesn't really have a choice, that the only way she can find out what happened and get justice for her sister is to take matters into her own hands. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it is talking a bit about how people don't, I'm going to say, care about Black women, in America at least. And, we don't get the grace, we don't get the care that other people get, and so it's not a race book. I don't think people of color should have to always write race books. I think sometimes people want us to all the time. But it is a book about a Black woman. So of course it's going to be, and it is a first person POV. It's going to be how Lena sees the world and how the world treats her in the book. So.
Mm-hmm. Anyone want to jump in?
I think justice depends a lot on who you are and what you want. There's legal justice and ethical justice, psychological justice, or justice might mean jumping over the railing and stabbing the killer with an ice pick. And there's, no matter how you seek justice, there's always a cost. In Goodbye Coast, Marlowe loses romantic relationships. He resolves the case, but he despairs over the victims. A young man with a huge future does something absolutely foolish and gets killed. I think however you pursue justice, you just don't get away clean.
I think one of the comforting fictions that we live with and it's not uniquely American, but it is very American, is this idea that the justice system is fair and that it's got us, and that the single system that we have in place for dealing with crime in a legal fashion is impartial, is ungameable, and I don't think anybody really believes that's true. I don't think a single person would say, for example, that somebody who has very, very wealthy parents gets the same shake as somebody who is using a public defender, right? I think that people understand that it's unfair, but but taking that as a starting point, you have to wonder, like, okay, if the one legal means to achieve justice is not actually just, like, what are you supposed to do about it? I think for most people, the answer is nothing, you know? And I think that for a lot of people, it's, you know, finding your own way, and who, yes, I think there are certainly lines where you can say, like, okay, like, you can correct for it, but not that way. But like, once you take away that thing that's supposed to be solid and foundational, like, everyone's just kind of improvising, right? And trying to get the correct result that they, as an individual, is now, you know, like, they're now in charge, right? Like, they're going to make these decisions. And, you know, if there's no correct answer, then all the answers are wrong, right? Or you have to, or you have to kind of find a way to be comfortable with whatever result you get. And so I think that's really rich territory for crime fiction, because I think I think everyone kind of has to know that, like, that this instability exists. You know, we're all just kind of trying to find our balance day to day.
And I think it's apparent in the books we're talking about that the characters are savvy enough. They know that going to law enforcement's like not a great option often, and it can result in more trouble coming down. I think that was true, and everybody knows where, you know, they don't feel like they can do anything within the bounds of the sort of legal justice system, and if they get them involved, you know, shit's gonna happen. Walter,
I think that just to get outside of, you know, just the particular the confines of a mystery or crime fiction, because crime fiction can be anything. You know, you can enter crime fiction saying, well, I know what's right. And I think a lot of people, you know, from Mickey Spillane on back, had that thing. Well, I'm doing the right thing, you know, and, you know, I might, you might not like me. You might not like how much I drink or smoke or how I look at women or men or whatever, but, you know, it's okay. But if you go all the way back, if you go, like, you know, to the Greeks and to Antigone, what you do is you see not one system, but two systems. You see, you know, there's a king whose son has rebelled against him, and you know, he's dead, and you know, his body's going to be discarded. I forget how that happens, but Antigone says, well, that's my brother, and because he's my brother and because he's royal blood, he needs to be buried, you know, royally. And so what you do is you have two different things. There's two different senses of justice, and I think that that's always the case in the kind of fiction that we're writing. That, you know, there's always something wrong. I mean, if you know, when you go to The Long Goodbye, you know, in the end, you know, Marlowe kills his friend, and, you know, because his friend, you know, messed up, and you know, and that's justice. That's justice. What do we think about it? I mean, well, it depends on who you are, and that's always the case. It depends on who you are. You present justice to somebody. You know, is Antigone right? Is her father right? You know, who's right? You know, you know, who killed Christ? You know, that kind of thing. You know, and so it's always kind of a dialectic, which understanding it, accepting it, and presenting it as you know, from where we come from.
One of the journeys that Joe King Oliver seems to be on is when to resort to violence. You know, he has powerful friends he can call in for help, but he's a fascinating character because he knows how to use it. He's thoughtful about it, but he also knows that there are some steps he could take which would, you know, should cut him off from the life and the people that he loves. Do you like giving your characters these really tough dilemmas?
Well, I think that is always, I mean, maybe it's not always, but sometimes it's very clear, you know, you're doing like Sherlock Holmes, and, you know, there's something happened and I need to explain what happened. And it doesn't really matter right or wrong, just or unjust, you know, at the end. But I think for noir fiction, for lack of a better word, I think that it's always that conflict, and it's always a human internal conflict, because the genre basically comes out of a kind of a popularized existentialism, right? So you have these writers who are talking about the complexity of the world and of the human heart inside that world.
Yeah. Jordan, can we talk for a second about consequences? There's one of the things I noticed in Everybody Knows is this kind of escalating body count, which, that's I was wondering what you think about the characters' willingness or reluctance to resort to violence.
Well, I think to answer that and also talk about the last question, I tend to write stories about people for whom the arrival of justice would not be totally good news. And the thing that really interests me these days is the definition of violence, and it's specifically those things that we don't consider violent. And in fact, there's a paraphrasing, because I don't have the book open, but there's a line in the book of like, the best trick they ever pulled was getting to define what is and isn't violence. And I'm not sure if we lost Cody there, but I'll keep going.
Here, I'm replacing a battery.
Oh, no worries. But it was also very important to me. There is a body count in my novel, and it goes up pretty quickly, especially in the middle. But my main characters aren't people who conquer through violence, or if they are, there is consequences to that, because I'm not interested in telling stories where like might makes right. And I think again that like I write about the kind of people that are doing bad things and know they're doing bad things and don't know what else to do. And the world around them is so violent in so many different ways, not just the literal versions that with guns and bullets and truncheons and hammers at one point, but just the violence of not knowing which way to go, which way to choose, the violence of people who are too poor to make rational decisions that allow them to make good, happy decisions. So I'm always trying to like tease those things out and kind of get to a place where, and to me also, sorry if I'm going all over the place, but to go back to the legal system, I don't like to differentiate between agents of violence. To me, violence is violence. A gun is a gun. So the idea that inviting a gun to the party is usually a bad idea. It's the way I see it. It doesn't matter who's carrying that gun. And so, I try not to be too overtly political in my work, as opposed to, how I feel in real life. But I definitely like to interrogate that idea of the people that we kind of give permission to do things that if anybody else did, we would be horrified. And I am horrified by, but most of the time we walk around life, and the fact that heavily armed people are around us all the time doesn't make us blink. Again, and that's a privileged position to even have that thought that I don't blink when they go by. But I feel like I went all over the place there, but this is like the heart of what I'm trying to dig out right now. So
yeah, some of the best explorations are when we don't know where we're going to land.
Yeah.
When we're still, debating what's our own views about what's right and wrong. Tying back to this idea of family, I'm going to take us in a little bit different direction. I'd love to explore how family shows up in your books, without being personal about your own life, unless you want to. Family estrangement in particular is one that is a thread that runs through a lot of these. With Your House Will Pay, it turns out the mother and daughter don't know each other that well, in terms of the history. Joe King Oliver is estranged from his ex-wife for really valid reasons. And Kellye, it was fascinating when you were talking about, there's the estrangement of Lena and Desiree as sisters, and then there's also the father becoming involved. And it seems like there's almost two arenas for these stories, where one is sort of very intimate in terms of who they're most connected with in this world, and the motivations for seeking justice. And then there's what's going on, the bigger picture, the crime, the society. How do you navigate that? That's a lot going on in one book. What did that spark any ideas?
I mean, for me, crime is mostly interesting because of what it reveals about people in these intimate settings, and reveals, who they are and what they care about. And I think that seeing all those ruptures in people's lives, because that is something, like, crime is extremely disruptive. It's supposed to be something that's out of the norm, that comes in and that has a wrecking influence. It's people getting hurt, right? And so, I find that the most rewarding arena to explore the results of crime, is the home, and looking at the way that it affects relationships. And I think also, as not just crime writers, but as fiction writers, I think we put our characters through a lot, because otherwise they're just sitting there. It's not that interesting, and I think it's always fascinating to know, why aren't these people talking to each other? I mean, I'm always, in that, like, gossipy sense of, when two people in a family don't talk to each other, there's usually a good story there. It's probably worth half a book on its own. I'm just thinking about, even in my own family, like, the one brother of my mom's who, like, didn't show up for their mom's funeral, right? Like, what is that about? Who does that? I think it's just there are good stories in, like, all these little crevices that all of us have, and all of us witness. And I think when you're writing about crime, it's really easy to highlight those things in an interesting way.
I think we all write about, to one degree or another, what happens when families don't work, and how those dysfunctions affect the people within the family, how they can learn to function in a twisted way, or can learn to extend themselves to other people, or who become isolated or depressed. And I think the family is a core of a lot of crime fiction. Now, what happens when your mother and father beat you? And how does that affect that person, and what that person does as a result of that? I think a lot of in Marlowe and the IQ books, I try and emphasize what happens to the victims of crime. In a lot of crimes, somebody gets shot and they're a victim, and see you later. But violence affects people, whether you're the shooter or the person who got shot. The shooter does not get away. And having been somebody on both ends of that, it changes you. It changes who you are. It changes how you see the world. And I attribute a lot of that to how I grew up, and my own family and its own dysfunctions. It gives you a very distorted view of the world, and a distorted view of relationships. And that all started around my dining table with my mother and father and three brothers.
Joe, in Smoke, Isaiah, the IQ character, he's basically got PTSD from all the stuff that happened prior to that, and it runs through the story and affects everything he does. To me, it was interesting to see such a focus on the consequences of violence, and how he tries to, like, find a way out and find healing, and of course that doesn't go as planned.
No, I think that to live in modern society, we all, to one extent or another, suffer from PTSD. We've seen too much violence. We've seen too much war. We've seen too many people die. We've seen too senseless killings and wars. To one extent or another, it affects you. it makes you withdraw. It makes you afraid, or it makes you violent. That's what I was writing about in Smoke. I wanted to just explore that and how I felt about that and how it might manifest itself in somebody like Isaiah.
Kellye, with Lena, we get this backstory of her basically not communicating with her sister for 2 years, and it starts out where we think, oh, they've had a rupture and they're not talking. But as the story moves forward, I think we see more and more that Lena doesn't have a lot of relationships, that she's actually overall quite isolated.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the people that your family's supposed to be the people that love you the most and take care of you, and in her mind, like with her father, that person who's supposed to protect her abandoned her because he's this hip hop mogul. And she feels like when he left her mom for Desiree's mom, he also left her. And he was caring more about his career. And in his mind, and it's not every Black man, but I paid for your school and I gave you a house and I bought you Christmas gifts. So he thinks he's being a good father because he's providing for her financially where she needed him to be there. And so that relationship, the person that she felt like she should protect her did not, makes her very wary of other people. And then now to have this rupture with her sister, because she feels like her sister doesn't care about herself because she's doing drugs and stuff and not admitting she has a problem, it makes her just very much a loner. And so yes, and like a sister, she hasn't talked to her best friend in years. She's in grad school, but she doesn't really hang out or talk with any of the other students, and it's because her family, the people she trusted the most, she feels like they abandoned her and hurt her the most as well.
Let's talk about like characters on.
Can I say something about this?
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting here thinking about it because there are different issues that we're bringing up. One, is family, of course, but in relation to crime or something done wrong, justice, and then there's consequences, which are really interesting, and then there's morality, and I wouldn't want to think that those are solid places that. So what you do is you have, for instance, Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin had an argument with his wife one day, and it was a pretty bad argument. And that night, she killed herself, or at least that's what they said, that she shot herself. And Joe was gone. I mean, nobody knows where the fuck Joe was, and he's gone. And his wife is dead, and there are no consequences, none, not one, not ever for Joe Stalin. And Joe Stalin killed a lot of people. I mean, we talk about, there's a lot in our books. Nobody kills as many people as Joe Stalin, though. I mean, except Mao Zedong, maybe. And I don't think he felt guilty. I don't think he felt, he might have felt afraid and he might have felt, bad. But, and I think that those kinds of moments come into our fiction where either there are no consequences or I don't care about the consequences. I mean, I don't mind. It doesn't matter to me what happens. What matters is that I have to do what I think is right for me. And sometimes I might think that affects somebody else. It is a really hard thing to talk about, but justice and consequences and morality are motive. They're moving around. They don't sit still. And if you could answer something, if you could say what was just, what was right, what were the consequences, that's probably not as complex as you could be as a writer.
And with crime fiction, I feel like you're exploring the extremes. Like these are not, with literary fiction, you might be on like just a little bit to the left or the right of this very kind of mild milieu, but with crime fiction, it's really about the borders and the margins and the
and the morality of the characters. I mean, you have in Red Harvest, you have one of the chapters is called The 17th Murder. I mean, there's a lot of murders in it, and the Continental Op commits a lot of them, and those that he doesn't commit, he causes to happen. You know, but for him, he's doing what's right. He's been hired to clean up this town, and he does, you know, by killing everybody, you know, and but we love him. Yeah. It's like, it's interesting. This whole notion of right and wrong and how we hold it.
Yeah. Can I take us in a direction? I want to talk about the role of refuge. You know, all of the characters in your stories at some point find a place where they can get away, they can be safe, or they're looking for some place they can get away and be safe. And you know, there's the physical details around, you know, is this a secure location? But there's also the emotional and psychological layers on top of that, of what it means. You know, what does it mean for them to be safe? I wonder if you could share how that comes up in your books.
You can never be safe from yourself.
Ah.
You can always find physical safety. And I think, like most of our characters, you can't escape yourself. Whatever emotional torment or guilt or shame you're carrying around with you goes wherever you go.
You know, I think one of the smartest things anybody ever said, and it works as a life lesson, it also works as a writing lesson if you're stuck in a story, is Sigmund Freud saying the repressed returns. There is nothing that you can tamp down that will not come back, and that's true. And that applies to so many of the different things we've been talking about. You know, who teaches you to repress? It's your family that teaches you to repress. Who represses you? You know, the power structures that we're in, and then we all you know, try and tamp down those things. So I agree with Joe that I think the type of people I tend to write about, you know, there's a love story at the center of Everybody Knows between May and her ex-boyfriend Chris, that they broke up their first time that they were a couple. They broke up because they found out they were the two people in the world they couldn't lie to. They couldn't lie to each other. And at first that's wonderful because they both lived these lives of total falsehood. And then they come to this really horrible and sad realization that total honesty all the time is not good. Not when you're stuck in a world where you have to do bad things every day. And so I think when you're carrying around that kind of emotional baggage, yeah, where can you go? You can check into the Chateau Marmont, as characters do in my book, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to lay back on that pillow and enjoy room service, because you're carrying these things with you and they are going to come out. And they come out on the you know, the interior level, and they come out on the macro level. So yeah, I agree with Joe about that.
And they come out in the mess of that Chateau Marmont hotel room. Jordan, while you're here, I wanted to ask you about May and the way that she is a bullet.
So May is grew up in just outside of my hometown. I cheated and just gave her she's from the Ozarks, and she is a person who is born into a family in a small, you know, town in the Ozarks, and her father is obsessed with guns, and she doesn't share that love for it. But what she realizes about herself is that she herself is a bullet. And she doesn't mean that in a violent way. She means that in that she realizes she is something special, and what she wants is to build a gun for herself that she can shoot herself out of this Midwestern town and wind up where she winds up, which is in Los Angeles. And then when she gets there, you know, she's put into this system of Hollywood where people who are like that can be molded into something that is, again, they find a new gun for her, and now she is a weapon. And I think, you know, a lot of people doing bad things, particularly when you get into conspiracies, if you're not a true conspiracy theorist, most conspiracies are just people being put in situations where everybody involved knows they're going to do the right thing, which I mean the wrong thing morally often. But like that May is a person who, when she gets to town and she's offered these jobs, she knows on one level that it's what she's doing, covering up for rich people and bad people. It's not a good thing to do, but she's good at it and it thrills her. And somebody said about her, like, we can send you through those doors because we always know you're going to do the right thing. We don't have to tell you what to do. And the moment she proves that is when she discovers a young dead actor who is overdosed, and she just instantly goes into cover-up mode. And then they know, okay, great. We never have to give this woman the instruction, cover this up. We never have to tell her, do the wrong thing. She'll do it. And I think so much of those kind of people, that's what it is. It's not some smoky room where everybody makes these intricate plans. It's finding the right kind of people and putting them in the position so that you don't have to sweat it, when the bad things happen.
I want to shift now to thinking a little more about setting. Whether it's your latest book or, a couple ago, you've all written about LA and Southern California. And I'm wondering what was most challenging or what you enjoyed about it.
So I lived in LA I'm in New Jersey right now. I'm a Jersey girl, but I lived in LA for about, I guess, 8 years. And like, I'm not the most creative writer. So I like to do places just because I know, just because it's easier for me. But also when I was younger, there were 2 authors, Harlan Coben and Valerie Wilson Wesley, who are based in New Jersey, and they're based in the areas that I grew up in. And so I used to love to read their books because I used to love to recognize places. Like, oh, I recognize that highway or that store, or it was just great. And I just love that feeling. It helped me connect to the book and feel like these are real people, real characters. And so that's what I want to do with my books, So with my Hollywood Homicide and my day books, which takes place in LA, it was important for me to have like La Brea and La Cienega and places I like to eat that I'm sure are not even there anymore. And now with like A Sister, it takes place in New York. And it's like, I talk about places I walk by or this and that, just so people can be like, oh, I recognize it from having been there. Or maybe they might go there later on and look like, oh, this was in like A Sister or Hollywood Homicide. So I think to me, it just helps to make things feel more real and just connect people to books. So.
Well, I think like Kellye, I'm not from Los Angeles. I've lived here for 15 years, but I definitely have an outsider's view of it. And so, like I said earlier, I was kind of passing a torch to myself. That's not something you do, but of leaving the places I was from behind. A lot of the great grit-lit writers, Daniel Woodrell, S.A. Cosby, they still live in those places they write about, and I couldn't do that anymore. And so I wanted to take on the city that I've lived in for 14 years. But I also, like Kellye, I like to write. I literally take my laptop and second draft and I go to places so I can just catch those real details of things that you can't just make up, that you can see, particularly in LA where there's always something happening and there's always something electric. And you go to Koreatown and you see a 1950s convertible being dragged behind a camera car with a K-pop band lip syncing their own songs and people on the side of the street screaming. And those are the kind of details that I just took 14 years of that and dumped it into this book. And again, I write about it as an outsider, but I think that's also a very LA thing to be an outsider. And it's a valid perspective on this city that I just feel is the ultimate American city at the end of the day. It's, America's always been about moving west, and then LA is America with its back up against the wall. And so I find it just fascinating from that point of view. But I also wanted to get everything right. I just have to give thanks specifically to Steph, who read an early draft of Everybody Knows and fixed some of my geography. And I was pretty good, but she definitely caught me as somebody turning the wrong way on La Brea, actually, I think. At one point.
I don't even remember that. That's so funny. You must have done pretty good job, because I hold that against people.
I think it was just the one turn, but still you caught it. So I appreciate that.
I don't even have that good a sense of direction, but I know LA pretty well. I like writing about California because like the two of you, it's just easier to write something where you can kind of go outside and be like, oh, okay, this is how it is. But yeah, I think that that particular in LA, it's just everything on top of each other, that feeling. And and also the sense that like there are millions of life stories unfolding in fascinating ways, like within like a couple square miles. I mean, that's just like, that's really interesting to me. Just I don't know. I feel like everyone has this realization at some point when they're a kid and they realize that like, everybody is like them in the sense that like everybody is interesting. Everybody has an inner life. Like all these people you see around for like a second have families and all that, and I remember having that feeling when I was a child for the first time and being like very like wowed by it. And I feel like when you live in Central LA, it's like that feeling all the time. And people have lives that you cannot imagine. I mean, that are just so intricate and interesting and so different from person to person, from block to block. I mean, I just the incredible diversity in every sense of the term that you cover when you drive for 5 blocks in any direction. I find that fascinating. And so I just think it's such rich territory, LA, California. I mean, just the idea that you'll never run out of story, like ever. It's impossible, you could write the most boring, hacky shit and the grist for that mill will always be fresh and interesting somehow. And I think that's what fascinates me about this place, just the density of experience.
Joe or Walter, you want to add to that?
Walter?
Well, I mean, it's not like I don't agree with what's been said. I just think like there was a time that I was doing a reading somewhere. This was quite a while ago. And a guy came up to me and said, hey, man, listen, that house that you talking about, the house that Mouse was in? And I go, uh-huh. He goes, I live across the street from that house right now. And, I made up that house, that street, that place, that thing. You know what I mean? It's like, I know I can't know all of this stuff. And some of the stuff, because it's fiction, I alter, to work, for whatever I'm doing. And there are feelings that I've had about places that I put into writing but they're not the feeling when it gets, resolved is not a real place. And nor do I think that it has to be, because, you write the book, and if 1 million people read the book, then that million, there's 1 million different books. Because they're all creating it. And the great thing about writing is you actually have to create these, very sensual and physical images out of words, printed on a page. And so that, no matter what I write, nobody is going to take it in exactly in the way that I meant it. And so that's usually what I think about place. Yeah.
Walter, you write place to get a particular feeling from it?
Yeah. I for feeling and for character and also for character, which is a little bit different than feeling, where a person lives, how a person lives in that place, what the place is like, what them going to it is like, what them existing in it is like,
So it's not so much about absolute authenticity as it is about credibility.
I don't even believe in the word authenticity.
Believing what you wrote.
I believe in what I write, but I don't believe in authenticity. I mean, I know that you know what I'm saying. Yeah. It's like I don't believe in team sports. That doesn't mean team sports don't exist. It just means I don't believe it. And I think that's how different we are in the world.
Yeah.
Walter, something you said earlier about how you found out after the book what it meant to you. Does that happen? I mean, for everyone else, like, do you look back on your books and see something different as time passes?
I don't read my books. I forget about them. I think about the next book. I mean, I think I'm not a little different, but I just want to write like fun books that people like can read on the beach. And I think that's totally okay. You know, I'm not trying to necessarily, if you think or get something from it, that's great. That's nice. But also if you're just like, oh, that was a fun book, then I'm also equally as happy. So
People tell me what my books are about.
mm.
Did they get it wrong?
I'm writing a character in a story, and then people come up and say, it's about this. Was this your theme? It wasn't my intention. It might be there, but it wasn't my intention.
To me, things like theme, whether it's there consciously or subconsciously, it's like a bass note. It can add a depth to a story that can make it more engaging, or it can draw people in deeper. And I think that's great. But much like booty-based music, things that are just about the theme is not really something that But Kellye, I can reference booty-based music.
It was so random. Sorry.
I just mean, like, to me, I find something that's just didactic and that this is about a message that I have, to me, is about as appealing as Miami club music would be to somebody who's not looking to get drunk and shake it. So that's my only point. It's a thing that makes a story stronger, but I'm here, like Kellye, to tell stories. That's my job. And if you want to do something else, there are much better vehicles in life than a novel.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Steph and Walter in particular write with more intention. You have issues and things you want to explore, and you write with that intention in your head. Am I making that up?
I mean, I always have an extra grand because I just always have an extra grand. But you know, and it ends up, whatever I care about ends up making its way into my fiction, because, oh my God, if you're going to spend that long writing something, then you better give a shit. So, you know, I think like thematic stuff does tend to make itself into my work, and I am generally pretty conscious of it. But honestly, stories tend to pop out at me because because something about them like resonates with the way I think, the way I see the world, and kind of the you know, particularly when you're thinking about issues like justice, you know, I like stories that kind of you know, the ones that like shake me are the ones that I'm interested in telling, and they do tend to kind of have some kind of meaning that isn't always very that obvious, or if there's an obvious layer, there's stuff that's underneath that is worth exploring. But you know, I think like, you know, the Latasha Harlan story in LA, I mean, you can't write a story that touches on that and not be conscious of like what is this story about, you know? I think it's kind of irresponsible to wade in there and just be like, I'm like coming in totally fresh and I'm going to tell everybody you know, my particular unique thing that nobody else has ever thought of before. You know, I think you know, I'm always kind of aware of like why I care, and that ends up kind of overlapping with, you know, my work and, you know, the way I approach it. You know, it's never theme first. It's always that the thematic stuff links up with the character stuff pretty readily.
I don't really know the answer to your question, Joe. I honestly don't, you know. I wrote a book once called John Woman, which is about a deconstructionist historian. And I wanted to explain what I thought of deconstruction, that I think all history is deconstructionist, but what I thought about this guy being it. But even that, after you go in, if you go in through a character's, you know, point of view far enough, it becomes, you know, diffuse, you know, and there's no answer, but it is about something, but there's no answer to that something, you know, no particular answer anyway.
Do you ever surprise yourself in the process? Like, do you think you're going in one direction and then the characters of the story like takes you in a different direction?
Daily.
I tend to take like, I think it was Nabokov who said I didn't say it like this, but these suckers work for me. And on a plot level, that's true, but like on ideas all the time. And I will say that the ending, I wrote Everybody Knows with a very specific ending in mind, that I wrote to. And then when I got there, I was like, oh no, nope, this isn't it. And I think that it worked out. I like the ending that the book has much more than what I tried to write, and I'm glad. But the surprises for me tend to be the things they say, and then and the ideas that come out of that, for sure.
And the ending of that novel.
And the ending of that novel. Yes.
Just some minor things. Well, we have time for one more. I mean, you all are here. I feel like this is your moment to like connect, but maybe you'll be, on the crime writer circuit again soon and with each other 2 days from now. I don't know. But I'm just thrilled that you all were able to participate and chat with each other.
Too.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to see all of these faces.
Indeed. And thanks for having us too. Really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
Cody, thank you for organizing.
Thank you for being here, and keep us in the loop on your books. We want to read them. So anyone have anything up next that they want to shout out?
Well, this is more a question for everyone. Anybody else going to the Tucson Festival of Books? Anyone? Just me?
I went last year. It was good. They had like people there buying books, which is sometimes rare.
Yes. Okay, well, that's good to know. Okay, I'll take that.
One time I did LA Times Festival of Books, and I interviewed Walter, and we sat at the signing table afterward, and he had this huge line, and I'm just hanging out, enjoying my time with Walter Mosley. And he says, when I first started out, I did a signing with Sue Grafton, and the same thing happened to me. And he said, one day I'll be dead like Sue Grafton. My favorite festival story.
Such a Walter story. I had that happen where Louise Penny was at Malice, and after every panel, you all go into a room, and literally it was probably like 20 other authors, and we all sat and watched everyone get in line out the door to have Louise Penny sign their book. I think it's funny. I think some other people it's an ego issue, but I think it's hysterical.
Well, I actually do have something to plug, because you mentioned Book Soup as one of your sponsors. I'm doing an event next week on the 28th at Book Soup with Winnie M. Lee, who wrote a terrific novel called Complicit that is also about the dark side of Hollywood. And it's sort of the more raw, realistic version of Everybody Knows. And so we've been talking back and forth about it a lot, and Winnie's in town right now. So we're going to be at Book Soup on the 28th at 7 p.m. So I'm going to be very relieved this has been great as well, as because my book just came out. I'm so glad to talk about other people's books and not my own, because I am
You get tired of it. You're on
talking about myself. Yes.
I get tired of my book. Like, that's why I say I don't read them again. Like, I think by the time like copy edits, line, page proofs, I'm like, I don't ever want to freaking see this stupid book again.
But the other thing, of course, is like by the time a book comes out, it's so long from long ago. You're working on new things and thinking about new things, and you have to say, what was that about? Oh yeah, right. Okay.
I feel like that's like the original tragedy of publishing, is the gap between when you're so in the middle of it and later when people can enjoy it. There's just that time lag.
It's also, for me, it's just weird to like.
Go ahead, Gil. Sorry.
Just like I think of my books are Word documents, and so like to me, like the fact that this has literally been like a Word document still on my computer is just really just strange to me.
I was going to say, writing is such a process job. I mean, you have to love actually the process of putting the words on the page, and the end result is when you're done. But
I hate writing.
Kellye hates writing.
Walter always like, I hate writing. I hate it. I love having written, but I hate writing. Walter loves writing. I hate it.
I'm envious of all of you. I haven't been working on a book in like years. So as far as plugging things, may I plug my 2 small children? So that's what I've been.
You hate them that much? Oh no.
No, they're the best. They're the
That was a
best, but
plug
you
out,
can't buy
yeah.
them.
Plug pun there.
Yeah.
Like that.
Well, thank you so much. We're out of time. I look forward to seeing you all again sometime, and wish you a very good night. And thank you. And I should at this point say that we have another one of these coming up soon in March, exactly 1 month from today. We'll be inviting in Natasha Deon, Tony Ann Johnson, Malia Marquez, and Laura Worrell. So find us online for the next WeHo Reads, March 22nd. If you're excited about getting together in person, we're doing that on April 26th at the West Hollywood Library outside. We will have former West Hollywood City Poet Laureate and current Poet Laureate and special guests. We will be doing kind of a spa day, and I'll keep it under wraps what that actually means, but it'll be a chill time to hang out with some poets outside to watch the sunset. And then finally, in May, we're returning to our poetry roots with a few special guests: Amber Flame, Gerda Govina Ituarte, Louisette Resto, Carla Samath, and Colette Sartor. So that has been WeHo Reads, Writing Paths Towards Justice. Thank you to Joe Ide, Jordan Harper, Steph Cha, Walter Mosley, and Kellye Garrett. Thank you for keeping us entertained. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Cody. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Great.
Thank you all. You all were